Welcome to the Explainer. Today we are diving into one of the most chaotic, incredible, and, let's be honest, often misunderstood periods of human life, the toddler years. You know, that explosive window between ages 1 and 3 when a tiny human basically transforms from a baby into a walking, talking person with a very, very strong opinion about, well, everything.
Okay, let's kick things off with a number that is, well, it's just mind-blowing. A massive 80% of a person's entire brain is built by the time they hit their 3rd birthday. And we're not just talking about the brain getting bigger here. This is the wiring, the actual foundation for everything they will ever learn, think, and feel for the rest of their lives. It's huge. So, to really get our heads around this incredible transformation, here's what we're going to do. We'll look at their amazing physical growth, we'll peek inside their developing mind, we're going to try to understand their big feelings, cover some absolutely crucial safety info, and finally, we'll challenge a very famous nickname. All right, first up, the incredible growing toddler. We're talking about building the physical foundation. The sheer speed of growth you see in these couple of years is something we literally never experience again.
Get this, by their 2nd birthday, a child's weight has typically quadrupled since they were born. That's an incredible growth spurt. And it's not just their weight. By that same age, they've already shot up to about half of their final adult height. Just amazing.
Now, this whole journey follows a pretty typical timeline, right? Around 18 months, they go from those wobbly first steps to confident running and, climbing on everything. That growing physical control also opens the door to a huge milestone, toilet training. While the readiness often shows up late in year 2, it's a great example of how, every kid is different. They all get there on their own schedule.
But all that physical stuff that's happening on the outside, it's being powered by an equally explosive development happening inside their mind. Let's look at that cognitive blueprint.
A huge driver of their sometimes, let's call it interesting behavior, is this deep psychological push for autonomy. It's a concept from the psychoanalyst Erik Erikson, and it's the engine behind that classic toddler demand, me do it. They have this overwhelming urge to test their own skills, and they can feel real frustration or even doubt when they don't quite get it right.
And then there's the language revolution. It's incredible. It starts with what are called hollow phrases, where just one word means a whole sentence. So juice could mean, I want juice, or I see the juice, or even, oops, I just spilled the juice. From there, around 18 months, they start stringing 2 words together. And then comes the vocabulary explosion, which leads to real sentences by the end of year 2. It's just a massive cognitive leap.
So, let's talk about feelings. How does all this internal growth connect to their emotional and social world? How do they even navigate relationships when their brain is so under construction?
I don't think anything captures the beautifully, let's say, egocentric nature of a toddler's social world better than this. These toddler property laws are hilarious because they are just so spot on. It's not that they're being selfish like an adult would be, it's just their own perspective is literally the only one they can compute right now.
That right there gets to the heart of why things like biting, hitting, or just total meltdowns happen. It is almost never about being bad. It's a communication breakdown. Imagine having these huge, complex feelings, frustration, excitement, exhaustion, but you just don't have the words to explain them. Those feelings have to come out somehow, and a lot of the time, they come out physically.
Of course, with all this new mobility and endless curiosity, a toddler's ability to find trouble, it skyrockets. And that brings us to the really critical topic of safety.
Let's start with car safety. We all use car seats to protect our kids, right? But here's a pretty shocking statistic. Nearly half, 46%, of all car and booster seats are misused in a way that could make them less effective in a crash. It's just a stark reminder of how important it is to get those details right, like keeping them rear-facing for as long as possible and getting the installation checked by a professional.
Now, navigating safety also means navigating some pretty complex health information. On the topic of immunizations, it's really helpful to just look at the timeline of the vaccine autism debate. It all started back in 1998 with a study that has since been completely discredited. That paper was fully retracted by the medical journal The Lancet in 2010, and since then, numerous large-scale studies have found no link between the MMR vaccine and autism.
All right, and finally, let's put one of the most famous or infamous labels for this age group under the microscope. Let's talk about the so-called terrible twos.
Are they really so terrible?
So here's what is absolutely fascinating. This whole idea of the terrible twos, which feels like this universal rite of passage in a lot of Western cultures, is almost completely missing in other societies. In cultures like the Aka in Central Africa, or among some communities in Guatemala, where the cultural values are all about collectivism and interdependence, the terrible twos, as we know it, just doesn't really happen.
So that leaves us with a really provocative question to think about. Is all that challenging behavior we call the terrible twos an inevitable biological stage that every kid has to go through? Or is it possible it says more about our culture and our expectations than it does about our toddlers?